Hi guys, and welcome to today's Taxidermy Tip Tuesday video. My name is Elle, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about binding your finished taxidermy mounts. So historically, if you look at illustrated guides to taxidermy, it's really interesting because very often they portray the last stage of the mount with the specimen wrapped up in string. And as of late, I have experienced a lot of pushback around the subject of binding your specimens. So it's really important to stress that this is a method that I find beneficial for some specimens in some instances. I do not use this on every single specimen that I mount. So only use this if you feel that it's going to improve the exterior appearance of your specimen somewhat. And don't be threatened by taxidermists thinking that this is not a by the book method, because it has been used for decades. And I genuinely believe that as taxidermists we should be concerned with the finished article and how close to perfection that is. I don't know if you saw my post about striving for perfection in taxidermy, but it's a very unobtainable thing. It transpires. So if you think that this is going to improve the appearance of your specimen when you take the thread off, then definitely go for it, because that should be our primary concern. But if you think that it might compromise it or it's not needed, then just leave it. It doesn't necessarily need it. And as you improve as a taxidermist and you get the feather groups where they need to be, you should need to use this less and less. But that does not mean to say that amazing, esteemed, established taxidermists don't use this method. So just do what's right for you, and I hope that if you do use this method at all, this video is useful. Okay, so you're at the point where your specimen is complete, everything's been assembled, and you're feeling great because your bird looks brilliant. And now you need to look at your bird and assess whether or not you think that any of the feathers perhaps are not in the right place. Perhaps some of the feather groups weren't quite back to where they needed to be. And that's okay, but you need to be mindful as to whether or not you think that binding is going to improve the appearance of the bird somewhat. So if you think that it does, you're going to need some thread. It's very, very easy to put the wrong thread on your specimen when it comes to binding and actually create dips and uneven surfaces over the feathers if you're using the wrong thread. So there are two types that I would use: very, very thin sewing cotton, or a slightly more heavy duty cotton. Again, it's just a thread that I would use in the process of taxidermy, but it's got a little bit more weight to it. So just be mindful of what weight you're going to be adding to the feathers, because you don't actually want to compromise and do more detrimental damage to the appearance of the bird when we're trying so hard to improve it at this point. Okay, so I'm ready to bind. I'm going to turn this bird around. And it's really important to stress that you don't need to bind the whole bird. I'm really happy with that side. I think everything's where it needs to be. So you don't need to bind everything. Very often I'll see taxidermists with string around the whole thing, and I feel as though that can be quite unnecessary sometimes, because you might be leaving impressions on the feathers where it didn't need binding to begin with. So only bind what you feel you absolutely need if you think it's going to improve the outcome. So if I turn this bird around, probably better to go that way, already I can see with the naked eye that there is a small patch of feathers here that isn't quite where I want it to be. I don't know if you can see that they're slightly raised. And if I refer to my reference image, I can see that the stomach is very smooth and rounded at the belly. So I just want to bring that area in. So what we're going to need is 2 acupuncture pins, or any kind of pins, Euro pins, like I used in the last video. These can just be found on eBay. They're great because they're super lightweight, and they're lovely for the small birds because they're not going to make loads of holes and tears in the skin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pins almost as like the fence posts for my thread. So I'm just going to put them either side of the tummy, which is the area that I'm concerned with. Don't need to put pins in the whole piece. And I'm not really pushing these in very far either. I'm kind of just literally getting them in a couple of millimeters, if that. They're super sharp, so they don't really need to be pushed in too far. Then I'm going to take a little length of thread. You don't need loads and loads if you're only binding a small part. I'm going to wrap a loop over that pin. And then what I'm going to do, and I hope you can see this, is I'm going to bring my thread around the area that I'm most concerned with and loop it over. I'll just do that on video. Loop it over. If I turn it back, I can then pull it as much, so that's it before. That's with a little, you can see that's very, very incremental modification. And that's really what the binding should be. If you're going to use binding at all, I think it really should be something that's used with caution and sort of not overdone. And I can definitely see an improvement in that shape. So I'm just going to pull that. I'm then going to very carefully wrap the thread around the branch so I don't sort of have it hanging around all over the shop and then sometimes accidentally I knock it or whatever. Just make sure it's not pulled too tight. Okay, am I happy with that? It's very good to use a mirror, so it's quite helpful that I'm doing this on camera because I can look into the camera and see. But if you do this in front of a mirror, it's really, really helpful. I'm kind of happy with that, so I'm going to get a little bit of tape. Just pop that over the thread just to hold it in place. And just check that that's exactly where it needs to be, and then you're done. That's all you need to do. And I mean, I hope you can see that on video, but I can definitely see that there is a little bit of an improvement there in the shape, and the shape is much closer to my reference image. The stomach has that beautiful round shape that the bird is synonymous with. So I really hope that's useful. If you have any questions at all, then please let me know. It's exactly the same if you were doing a wing. You just create 2 fence posts, as I like to call them. So you would just get 2 pins and you would pop them in the wing, like so. I may as well show you since I'm doing this video. And you would take another length of thread. You would make a loop to place over the first fence post, like so, and then depending on what you were trying to do, you would then bind perhaps something like that, if that was what was needed on your specimen, and then I would probably just let that hang. And the weight of the string would bring together feathers that perhaps were compromised or raised or not quite in the right feather group. I really hope that this is useful, and if you have any questions, please leave them below. I know that it can be a little bit of a minefield, but only bind if you feel that it will really improve the appearance of your specimen.